Okay. No slideshow. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Machel, and I've been working with Dr. Susan DeBari, as Christina mentioned, for the past year on the Koma Kulshan project. And I'm going to be talking to you today about the most recent explosive eruption from Koma Kulshan, or Mount Baker, and how we can use trace element concentrations to make sense of magma sourcing for eruptions. So Claire did a great job giving a land acknowledgement that we are Western Washington University is located on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. And with this in mind, I want to make note that we prefer using the indigenous name of Koma Kulshan. However, this doesn't come without complications. Koma Kulshan has different names from different indigenous tribes within the Pacific Northwest. As for this project, we use the name Koma Kulshan when talking about Mount Baker. So Koma Kulshan itself is the northernmost volcano of the Cascade volcanic arc, and volcanism here is initiated by subduction of the Juan de Fuca plate and underneath the Pacific plate. Now, Koma Kulshan is a primarily andesitic stratovolcano, which means it's moderately silica-rich, and it is the youngest volcano of a 1.3 million-year-old volcanic field. And roughly 1 million years ago, within this volcanic field, there was a huge super eruption of silica-rich magma, or dacitic magma. And after this followed continuous activity from the volcanic field. And this included eruptions of majorly andesitic or moderately silica-rich magmas, and with some eruptions being basaltic, which is less silica-rich. Now, the main Koma Kulshan edifice formed roughly 30,000 years ago, with the offshoot Schreiber's Meadows cinder cone forming 9.8 thousand years ago from the eruption of Sulphur Creek. Now, pre-Holocene explosive eruption deposits aren't well preserved due to glaciation, mobilizing, and eroding different tephra units before the Holocene. However, the Holocene stratigraphy from explosive eruptions is pretty good, showcasing 3 juvenile tephra units. And also, to clarify, when I use the word tephra, I'm more describing fragments ejected from a volcano. So the oldest, we have tephra set SC, which erupted from Schreiber's Meadows cinder cone. Isn't pictured here, but is located right under this lahar. We also have the tephra layer O, which is a deposit from the Mount Mazama eruption of Crater Lake in Oregon. And this erupted 7,600 years ago. And then the focus of my project, the tephra layer BA, which is of the most recent explosive eruption from Koma Kulshan and deposited from a Sherman crater 6,700 years ago. Now, this eruption deposited 0.1 cubic kilometers of ash being exposed on the southeast and northeast flanks of the volcano. The Black Andesite tephra, or the BA tephra, is fully to partially composed of volcanic glass and has some phenocryst assemblages. So with these phenocryst assemblages, the bulk composition of the BA tephra is majorly andesitic, which is moderately silica-rich, and the glass composition of the BA tephra is dacitic, which is more silica-rich. However, up until this point, there has been no comprehensive geochemical analyses done on the BA tephra, and with this, there hasn't been much magma sourcing. There hasn't been any magma sourcing linked to this eruption of the BA tephra. So my research question looks to characterize the BA tephra geochemistry and to understand magma sourcing for the eruption of the BA tephra. Now, this is important because the Koma Kulshan volcanic field has 4 distinct magma series, with the most prominent being the high magnesium magma series, as most of the eruptive units were sourced from this family of magma. And then also the low magnesium magma family, which sourced the second most recent magmatic eruption from Koma Kulshan right before the eruption of the BA tephra. And the alkaline series and the LKOT series are so geochemically distinct from arc magmas and calc-alkaline magmas. So with all of these magma families, I hypothesized that the BA tephra sourced from this low magnesium magma source. And this is because the second most recent magmatic eruption of Sulphur Creek 9,800 years ago was sourced from this same series and right before the BA tephra eruption. And then additionally, the BA tephra glass matrix is dacitic, which is silica-rich in composition. And this is similar to the dacitic remobilization of the Sulphur Creek eruption proposed by Garvey et al. 2022. Now, a majority of the samples I utilized of the BA tephra for this study were collected and generously donated by Dave Tucker, who's in the audience right now. And those samples were denoted by DT. I also was provided with a lake core from the Heather Meadows by Doug Clark. And these samples of the BA tephra were denoted by HLG. And then additionally, samples were collected in September of 2022 along the Scott Paul Trail, which is south of the Koma Kulshan main edifice. And these are denoted by 22 kk. And as Claire outlined perfectly, and my samples are also prepared with an epoxy grain mounts, where there's a thin layer of a tephra cured with a mixture of epoxy and hardener and oriented as such when bringing them to the instruments I use to analyze element concentrations. And those instruments I used include the Teskin scanning electron microscope, or the SEM, and the laser ablation inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer, or the LAICPMS. Now, major element concentrations were analyzed on the Teskin SEM, and in addition, images of these epoxy mounts were taken at varying constrained viewpoints to map out the samples for when I brought the same samples to the LAICPMS. And here are some of those images from the Teskin SEM. From left to right, we have a decreasing scale, and each of these viewpoints were constrained and taken for each of the samples. Now, this yellow rectangle on the far right represents one glass spot and represents a confined space in which I took my, my element analyses. And this ranged in diameter from 30 to 50 microns. And in total, I analyzed for 40 glass spots of BA tephra. And within those same spots, I analyzed for the trace element concentrations using the LAICPMS. And these glass spots were analyzed using a 30 micron beam. And once the data was obtained, there was an extensive data reduction process, which included going through each of the element spectra and reducing that spectra for each of the samples utilized. So here we have a total alkali silica plot with silica dioxide in the x-axis and sodium dioxide plus potassium dioxide on the y-axis. We have all of our magma families represented and plotted here, shown at the top of the legend. And then the rest of those plotted are of the BA tephra samples. Now, a couple things I want to note before I continue talking about my results is that when looking at the major element concentrations of the BA tephra, there were some high silica anomalies, and this could be indicated as not even being BA tephra and being from a different tephra unit. So for the duration of the project, I didn't consider, I just removed these from consideration as BA tephra. And additionally, I want to make note of the LKOT series and the alkaline series as being so geochemically distinct from the other calc-alkaline magma series that these are also not in consideration for the sourcing of the BA tephra. So here are plots of silica dioxide against other major element oxides. And one thing, again, I want to point out is that the BA tephra samples that I looked at are of the glass matrices, and the represented magma family samples are of bulk composition. This is why the BA tephra plots at a higher silica dioxide concentration. Now, if we took the bulk composition of the BA tephra, these would plot along the similar array as these calc-alkaline magma families, and shown in these little X's on each of these plots. And these X's were developed from data from Scott et al. 2020. Now, these plots kind of just show that a little bit more, with silica dioxide plotted against magnesium oxide on the left here. And again, that bulk composition follows the array of the calc-alkaline magma series. And then on the right is silica dioxide plotting against the magnesium number, just showing increasing fractionation within the melt as silica dioxide increases. So getting into the trace element concentrations, we have two plots here. On the left is extended trace elements on the x-axis, and the y-axis shows samples normalized to primitive mantle. And on the right, we have rare earth elements on the x-axis and samples normalized to chondrites on the y-axis. Now, each of these lines of data are representative of one sample. And the data plotted here is representative BA tephra samples and representative high magnesium magma family samples. So looking at the plot on the right of the rare earth element patterns of each of these samples, we can distinguish a slope trend, an average slope trend for the BA tephra and the high magnesium series. And this is best represented as lanthanum to ytterbium ratio. So with this, we can gauge that the high magnesium magma family has an average lanthanum to ytterbium ratio of 8.52, while the BA tephra has an average lanthanum to ytterbium trend of 9.61. Now, taking these same representative BA tephra samples and comparing them to the low magnesium calc-alkaline magma family samples, we can see that the lanthanum to ytterbium average lanthanum to ytterbium ratio of that low magnesium series is 5.7, which is a lot more shallow when you compare to the lanthanum to ytterbium average trend of the high magnesium series and relating to the BA tephra. So taking that lanthanum to ytterbium ratio and plotting against silica dioxide, we could see here that the BA tephra still plots at a higher lanthanum to ytterbium ratio along with the high magnesium magma series. And then taking that lanthanum to ytterbium ratio and plotting against barium to lanthanum, the BA tephra clusters right over this bigger high magnesium magma family cluster at higher barium to lanthanum and higher lanthanum to ytterbium ratios. So this is the same plot as shown before. However, each of the data points are characterized by their volcanic units from the Koma Kulshan volcanic field. And the dashed line just shows those average rare earth element pattern slopes that I showed a couple slides before. And still here we can see that the BA tephra kind of clusters at a higher lanthanum to ytterbium ratio along with the high magnesium magma family. And on the contrary, the low magnesium calc-alkaline magma series plots at a lower lanthanum to ytterbium ratio. And again, represented here is that same barium to lanthanum versus lanthanum to ytterbium plot, where that BA tephra clusters right over the high magnesium magma family kind of cluster at higher barium to lanthanum ratios and higher lanthanum to ytterbium ratios, as opposed to the lower barium to lanthanum ratios and lower lanthanum to ytterbium ratios shown in the low magnesium magma family. Now, taking this BA tephra and putting it along a timeline of eruptive units from the Koma Kulshan volcanic field, the higher lanthanum to ytterbium ratio of the BA tephra plots similarly to erupted units that were sourced from this high magnesium magma family, as opposed to the low magnesium magma family. And zooming in to the last 50,000 years of magmatic eruptions from Koma Kulshan, we can relate the BA tephra to a similar lanthanum to ytterbium ratio as the eruptions of Glacier Creek and Swift Creek. And we can see here that the Sulphur Creek eruption is plotting at a lower magnesium magma series at a lower lanthanum to ytterbium ratio. And this just better shows that the BA tephra plots at a similar lanthanum to ytterbium ratio as these other eruptive units. So kind of putting this all together, I can infer that the tephra layer BA was sourced from this high magnesium magma series, as opposed to the originally hypothesized low magnesium magma series. This cartoon on the left just shows those two magma series within the same kind of plumbing system with a 50,000-year margin. And now kind of rounding up my talk, I want to thank everyone listed on this slide, but I want to point out specifically thanking Dr. Susan DeBari for her advisement and inspiration throughout this project. I also want to thank Dave Tucker for his donation of BA tephra samples. This project wouldn't have been possible without his gracious donation. And I also want to thank him for study area guidance during field work last summer. I want to thank my friends and family for their continuous support in my geologic understanding and college career. And I also want to thank the Erupt group here at Western for giving me a place to practice my igneous petrology research skills and presentation skills. And in the honor of our rep group members sharing their feline friends and representing their feline friends, I want to thank Frankie for her emotional support throughout this whole project. And that sort of rounds up my talk. I want to thank everyone for coming and listening, and I'll take any of your questions.
Awesome job, Stone. If everyone can unmute their microphones and give Stone a round of applause, please do. Woo! I am very impressed with your ability to spout out trace elements with such confidence and accuracy. So with
it took practice. It definitely took practice, yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Please raise your hand or put them in the chat. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Stone, that was really cool. I don't have a specific question about your project. I would like to ask you if you could get that PowerPoint to me.
I could definitely send that to you, of course.
I mean, it's probably going to be a pretty big file, but we could arrange it somehow.
Thank
you. I appreciate what you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, and then again, thank you for all of your gracious donation of samples. As I said, this project would not have been possible without your work.
Sure, so, you can have all the little bits of gritty dirt you want from me.
I love it. Yeah, Spencer.
Oh, first of all, it was just so cool to see that research finally characterized. And I'm wondering if your super rhyolitic samples came from bubble rims at all, or are those just too small to look at in the laser ablation?
Well, one thing that me and Sue kind of considered when looking at these samples is the idea that tephra, the size of these tephra units, there could be tephra units that we still haven't even found from the Koma Kulshan volcanic field. So this could be indication of another smaller magmatic eruption. But as far as what you're asking, I'm not totally sure.
Oh, okay.
It's just past this study, I think we would need to compare those specific samples to other tephra units within the Holocene explosive eruptions. But yeah.
All right.
Any questions? Any questions in the chat? All right, we got Dave Tucker again. Go for it.
Oh, Dave, I think you're muted.
Since we brought up the question of the very high silica results, I did get some microprobe work done on some samples like years ago, and a few less than that, and by Nick Foyt over at WSU, and he did return some data that was very high silica from some of the various tephra layers I was looking at, and pointed out that it is very possible that there's been mixing of tephras from different volcanoes. So it's possible that there could be small drifts of Glacier Peak tephra, which is more silicic than Koma Kulshan. Yeah, that could possibly be drifted in here, and that we're seeing those sorts of samples. And I have all of that data if you're interested in it.
Oh, I definitely am. Yeah, Christina.
Yeah, I'll just also add to that so when you analyze glass, right, it is the fractionated portion, and so the bulk includes the crystals, and so actually it's many andesitic magmas will have glass that approaches rhyolitic compositions, and so I guess Mahina is in the crowd here too, so she can confirm that at Augustine volcano, the erupted magma is the bulk pumice composition is an andesite, but if you analyze the glass, you're excluding the crystals, and it can be upwards of rhyolitic composition. So not like crazy surprising for an andesite. Could just be like local variation, higher crystallization in those areas. Yeah.
Yeah, Mahina.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I'm not using my headphones. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, great job, Stone. I did analyze glass for my work on Augustine. So I'm curious, like, if you could talk a little bit about how that worked, like maybe with like the error, because I know glass can be like the certain spots might have like heterogeneous and might not be super consistent. So maybe could you talk a little bit about how you addressed that or took that into consideration?
Yeah, well, so I guess to the extent of my study, one major thing I had to consider was when I was looking for these different glass spots on the Tuscan SEM, you know, how the shading of plagioclase crystals and glass is so similar. So that's one thing to take into account, is that the glass spaces I could be looking at, that I'm looking at, it's hard to know how thick they are. So when I bring them to the LAICPMS, if it's ablating past the glass and then into the epoxy, but then also if there's any microlights underneath the glass, and ablation goes through the glass and then just straight into the plagioclase. So that there's, yeah, it's kind of hard to constrain that, but I kind of just had to take it as find a good glass spot where it's just glass on the surface, and then during the data reduction process using the LAICPMS, you can kind of see which spots had like hidden microlights or whether the glass was very thin.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. So you may not have thought this deeply, but some of your results are really intriguing in that when you showed the last 50,000 years, I noticed that, for example, the Sulphur Creek is much closer to that sort of transitional line between the calc-alkaline and the high magnesium andesite. Have UNC talked at all about, for those lower lanthanum, ytterbium, high magnesium andesites, do you think they might be mixtures of these different mantle sources? Or do you really think that, you know, the calc-alkaline things sort of stay on the flanks of the volcano and the high magnesium is sort of the main parental magma that goes through the edifice? Any speculation there?
I mean, there's definitely speculation of these two series like mixing, and that's not much of what my project is about, but me and Sue have definitely talked about it. And yeah, you point out perfectly, like this Sulphur Creek is like right on the barrier of that high and low magnesium series. So yeah, I think I think that's enough indication for, you know, looking more into magma mixing between these two series. And like on this cartoon, I added a little question mark to kind of, you know, propose that question: is there mixing here? And I know Erin Kaplan will be, you know, looking more into that in her future graduate work. So stay tuned for that. But that's kind of all I can say on magma mixing there.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And I do want to commend you as well. Really clear figures. It's really hard to talk about and show trace elements and trace element ratios effectively. And I thought you did a really great job of doing that with the shading and the colors. So yeah, really great presentation and great thesis.
Thank you so much.
All right. Any other questions? Well, if there are no more questions, if everyone can give both Stone and Claire one more round of applause, and whew, nice job, everyone. And hopefully we'll see most of you next Friday for some senior thesis presentations about planetary core formation. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Cool.